Meet Mimo, the tiniest, most curious cat in the seaside town. Mimo dreams of exploring the world beyond his cozy home. And today, his wish is about to come true. Get ready for an exciting adventure as Mimo sneaks onto a cruise ship for the first time. What wonders, challenges, and fun will he encounter? Let's find out. Mimo was no ordinary cat. While other cats were busy napping in the sun or chasing butterflies in the garden, Mimo had bigger dreams. He spent hours perched on the windowsill of his seaside cottage, staring at the vast, endless ocean, where enormous ships glided majestically across the water. The glistening blue of the sea, the soft rustling of the waves, and the gentle hum of distant engines filled Mimo's heart with a sense of wonder. He longed to know what it would be like to sail on one of those ships, to feel the cool breeze on his fur, and to explore the world beyond his little seaside town. His humans, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, often talked about their exciting trips. Mr. Brown would smile and say, "Oh, we're going to explore some exotic places this summer." Mrs. Brown would nod and add, "I can't wait to feel the sand between my toes on some beautiful beach." But every time they made these plans, poor Mimo was left behind, stuck with the neighbor, Mrs. Duffy, who wasn't exactly a cat lover. Mrs. Duffy always gave Mimo a stern look as if he were a mischievous troublemaker, which, in Mimo's opinion, he was not. He simply had an adventurous spirit. So, when one day, Mimo overheard Mr. and Mrs. Brown excitedly discussing their upcoming vacation, he perked up his ears and listened intently. "We're going on a cruise next week," Mrs. Brown announced, her voice full of excitement. Mimo's ears twitched. A cruise. That was it. This was his chance for adventure. He could already imagine himself aboard the ship, feeling the salty sea breeze ruffle his fur, with endless horizons ahead of him. His tiny heart raced. He had to go, no matter what it took. As the humans busied themselves with preparations, Mimo sat quietly in his favorite spot, planning his next move. The morning of the cruise arrived, and the Browns were bustling around, packing their bags, and getting ready for their vacation. Mimo watched from the window as they loaded their luggage into the car. His mind was made up. He had to act fast. While Mrs. Brown was busy folding clothes and packing them into a suitcase, Mimo saw his opportunity. As she turned her back, Mimo leapt up onto the bed and silently slipped inside one of the open suitcases. He nestled down among the soft sweaters and t-shirts, his tail curling around him like a blanket. He purred to himself, feeling safe and hidden. The suitcase felt like the perfect hiding place. As the zipper of the suitcase closed, Mimo's excitement grew. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps as the Browns prepared to leave. He was about to embark on the greatest adventure of his life, and nothing could stop him now. He drifted off to sleep, dreaming of far-off lands and daring exploits on the open sea. When the Browns arrived at the harbor, Mimo peeked out from the small gap in the zipper, his bright green eyes wide with amazement. The cruise ship was a giant among ships, towering above the docks, gleaming in the sunlight like a massive floating palace. Its hull was a perfect shade of white, with colorful flags fluttering in the breeze. The deck sparkled, and the sounds of people chatting excitedly filled the air. Mimo felt a flutter of nervousness in his chest but also a thrill that he had never felt before. This was it. He was really here. The Browns made their way onto the ship, completely unaware of their little stowaway. They checked in, received their cabin key, and went about settling in. As soon as they were out of sight, Mimo seized the moment. He jumped out of the suitcase, his tiny paws landing softly on the polished floors of the ship. He looked around, wide-eyed at the enormity of the place. The ship was even more magnificent on the inside, with gleaming floors, luxurious furniture, and chandeliers that sparkled like stars. Mimo's heart raced with excitement as he scampered away, ready to explore every inch of this giant vessel. He wandered through the corridors, slipping past large groups of passengers and avoiding the ship's staff. Everything was so new to him. There were massive dining halls, filled with people laughing and eating, a grand theater where people rehearsed dances and acrobatics, and outdoor decks with shimmering swimming pools. Mimo's eyes grew wide as he took in all the wonders around him. He padded across the shiny floors, feeling the cool surface beneath his paws, and peered over railings to see the sparkling sea below. But his adventure wasn't all smooth sailing. At the buffet table, Mimo spotted a plate of grilled fish, just sitting there, unattended. His mouth watered, and he knew he had to have it. Quietly, he jumped onto the counter and grabbed a small piece of salmon. But before he could escape, a group of seagulls swooped down from the open deck, their loud squawks filling the air. "Hey! Get your own fish," Mimo hissed, puffing up his fur to make himself look bigger. The seagulls weren't intimidated, though, and they continued to dive toward him. In a panic, Mimo darted under a table, narrowly avoiding their sharp beaks. His heart pounded in his tiny chest, but the fish was his, and he wasn't about to give it up. After escaping the seagulls, Mimo decided to find a quieter place to rest. He wandered to the outdoor deck and found a cozy spot by a lifeboat. The ship's gentle rocking motion helped him fall asleep, and he napped peacefully under the warm sun. But when he woke up, the sky had turned a rich shade of orange, with pink streaks blending into the horizon. It was evening, and the sea sparkled like diamonds under the fading light. Mimo climbed up to the railing, feeling the cool breeze ruffle his fur. He looked out at the endless expanse of water, feeling as though he were at the edge of the world. In the midst of this tranquil moment, a strong gust of wind blew Mimo's tiny sailor hat off his head. He watched in horror as it tumbled through the air, landing in the ocean below. "No!" Mimo meowed, his ears flattened against his head as he stared at his lost hat floating away. It had been his prized possession, a reminder of his dreams of adventure. But as he sighed, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Well, aren't you the cutest stowaway?" The voice belonged to a young crew member named Emma, who had spotted Mimo from across the deck. She smiled and walked over, gently scooping Mimo into her arms. "Don't worry, little one," she said. "I won't tell anyone you're here." Emma carried Mimo to her cabin, where she set up a soft bed for him using a towel. She even gave him a bowl of milk, which Mimo eagerly lapped up. He purred loudly, feeling safe and cared for in her presence. Emma seemed kind, and Mimo felt a bond with her that he hadn't expected. He had found an ally on this grand adventure. Over the next few days, Emma took Mimo under her wing. She showed him the ship's many wonders, taking him to the engine room, where massive machines hummed and giant pipes hissed. Mimo watched in awe as the engines powered the ship forward, feeling the vibrations beneath his paws. Emma also took him to the captain's bridge, where Mimo got to sit in the captain's chair and pretend to steer the ship. He felt like the true captain of the vessel as he looked out over the vast ocean. One night, the ship sailed into a fierce storm. The wind howled, and the waves tossed the ship from side to side. Mimo clung to Emma, his little heart racing with fear. The storm was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he could hear the creaking of the ship as it battled the waves. The thunder roared, and lightning flashed across the sky. Suddenly, a faint meow reached Mimo's ears. He froze, his ears twitching. Curious, Mimo followed the sound down the dark, winding corridors of the ship. As he rounded a corner, he found a tiny gray kitten huddled in a corner, wet and trembling from the storm. The kitten looked up at Mimo with wide, fearful eyes. Mimo's heart went out to her. He nudged the kitten gently, as if to say, "It's okay. Follow me." The kitten hesitated but finally stood up and followed Mimo back to Emma's cabin. Emma was surprised to see the new arrival but quickly took care of the kitten, drying her off and setting up a second towel bed. Mimo curled up beside the kitten, purring softly to comfort her. The storm raged outside, but inside Emma's cabin, it was warm and safe. As the days passed, Mimo and the gray kitten, whom Emma named Luna, became inseparable. They explored the ship together, sneaking into the theater to watch the performers rehearse their acrobatic routines, and playing hide and seek in the gift shop. The crew adored the two little adventurers and often snuck, and so, Mimo returned home, his heart full of memories from his big cruise adventure. From making new friends to braving a storm, Mimo proved that even the tiniest cat can have the biggest adventures. But who knows what awaits him next? Stay tuned, because Mimo's journey might just be beginning. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fun stories.